Hi, I'm Dr. Miller, and I'm one of the Associate Deans here in the College of Education at Ashford University. And I'm going to give you a real quick overview of the edTPA lesson plan template that we use in all of our methods courses in our education preparation programs here. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch over and share my screen if you give me a second to do that. What you should be seeing now is the template, the actual general lesson plan template, the edTPA template. Now it has 4 parts to it. Now this template is pretty extensive, and the reason for the template is to teach you to think about every component of instruction that'll help all of your students. We're talking about language students that need language support, ESL students, gifted students, mainstream students, those that may have 504 plans or IEPs, so that all of your students can master the content. So this will help you also successfully prepare for the edTPAs, which some of your states will require for reciprocity. So what I'm showing you is a lesson plan that's already filled out. And on the yellow components, excuse me for the jump, the yellow components are the parts where the student has, answered the questions that are on the left-hand side in each section of the lesson plan template. So section 1A, or part 1A, basically you just establish the central focus of the lesson. You give the standards and the objectives, what the student will know, will be able to do and understand after you teach the lesson. Part 1B is where we talk about the academic language demands. This is mainly for your ESL students, and it breaks those language demands into several parts, right? But it will help you fully prepare for your ESL students so they can master that content with as little barriers as possible. And then the next section of 1B talks about the 21st century skills that apply. So in here, you'll match any of these skills on this side, and if they show up in your lesson, you'll just list them on the right-hand side and say how they showed up. If they didn't show up, don't stretch it, they're just not there. The next section is utilizing knowledge about the student's plan, about the student, so you can plan and implement instruction. So really what you're doing here is you're explaining how you'll utilize prior knowledge to meet both the individual and the group needs for students during the lesson. And you can break that down in any way you like. You see how this student did an individual student, students with IEPs, ELLs, and so on and so forth. As you move on throughout this, this section is still about differentiating and what you're going to do to work with each of your students. As you slide down, the next main section in 1B is the interdisciplinary connections. So suppose you're teaching a math lesson. If it has a connection to, say, science, art, and English language arts, or reading and writing, then you'll write what that connection is there. So to help you think more globally about your instruction and get you in the habit of planning what's called thematically, so your students can understand the lesson and be able to utilize it in deeper ways. Then part 2 of the lesson plan is all about outlining the actual instruction that you're about to do. So you're going to break it down into the beginning or before part. So how will you introduce this lesson? How will you get the students involved, and make them excited about what you want to teach? And then you move to your actual learning activities that happen during the lesson. So what activities will they do? What exactly will you implement? How will you teach this lesson? How will you solidify this knowledge for these students as the lesson moves on? And then you move into your practice component. So after you introduced the lesson, you've taught the lesson, they've done some activities so that they understand what the content is about, how will you practice it? Will it be guided, plan supports? Will they do it independently, in a group? How will they practice so that they understand and lock in and be able to use what you've just taught? And then finally, you have the closure or after component of your lesson, where you're basically just saying, listen, this is what we taught. This is how I'm going to make sure they have it. Is it going to be an exit ticket or whatever the case may be? How will you show that those students have learned that content and are able to utilize it? Then you move into the extra parts of extension if you have time. How will you extend the learning of the lesson? And then the theoretical principles and research-based practices. Very important for those taking the edTPAs. This piece here is needed so you can tie whatever instruction and strategies you did back to research-based components. They want to see that on that edTPA lesson. You have materials, and then you move to part 3 of the edTPA lesson plan template where you'll outline, your assessments. On this left-hand side here, you'll tell whether you're dealing with a formative or summative assessment. And then on the right-hand side, how does that assessment align with the objectives? And then what's the evidence that the student's learning? Is it going to be a written test? Is it going to be a performance-based test? What are you going to do so you have evidence that that student has learned that content? What will the rubrics look like? And so forth. And then finally, how will you explain to that student and communicate to that student what they've, how they performed on the assessment? And based on the assessment, what is it that they, are strong in and where are the areas of improvement? So it takes us to part 4, where you'll just reflect. You'll see this part's not filled in because in this particular course, the student hadn't taught the lesson yet. So the reflection component is, okay, what happened afterwards? What worked, what didn't work, who did it work for? What adjustments can you make when you prepare your lesson for tomorrow, because you're going to further what you did today, you're going to take it to the next step tomorrow. And then what would your changes be if you were to teach this lesson again? If you could turn time back and teach it again, what would the changes be, and how do you justify those changes so that they, support student learning, and what research-based methods match those proposed changes that you have? So, in a nutshell, you guys, that is the edTPA template. I'm going to also include a link at the bottom of the comments here in the YouTube video for a much longer video that you could watch if you need more detail about each of the sections. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully this helps you to master that edTPA template as you move forward and you go ahead and finish the program. We're excited to have you. We know you're going to be a great educator, and you make it a great day or not, because that choice is always, and I mean always,